Jess and I are going to be talking about the fact that opportunities happen in the moment, not in batches, what the implications of that are, and how you can best deal with that fact. I think the reason that we wanted to talk about this is because compelling interactions that take advantage of the opportunities present in a moment in your customer's life are key to increasing product usage, cross-sell, retention. And you can see this from everything from the fact that companies that implement just basic levels of personalization see double-digit percentage increases in a range of key revenue metrics, all the way to the fact that some of the most successful tech companies in the world are obsessed with compelling interactions in the moment. Some obvious examples are companies like TikTok, Spotify, Pinterest, but of course there are many more. So given that it is so key to be able to create compelling interactions that take advantage of the opportunity in the moment, how do you do that? What capabilities do you need? And also, how do you do it in a way that is competitive, right? Your customers are living in an age of pervasive digital engagement. They have very high expectations of how you are going to engage with them, and they've experienced compelling interactions in the moment. So what do you need to get this right? So we've worked with a number of companies to enable them to achieve this, and we found that there's two key pillars that you really need to get right to be able to generate these compelling interactions in the moment. The first is actually being able to be in the moment, so being able to react in real time. And I'm going to talk a bit more about what that means, flesh out some of the concepts, how you can implement them, what some of the pitfalls might be. And then the second piece is being able to understand the behavior of the human in your system, not just as a mathematical construct and set of data points, but really incorporating insights from fields like sociology, psychology, behavioral economics, and all of that learning that's been developed over hundreds of years, and trying to include that understanding into your kind of machine learning pipeline and marry the two together. And Jess is going to be talking a bit more about what that all means in the second half of the presentation. So, real time. So I'm going to split the discussion of real time into a number of different pieces, and you can almost see them as a journey to build out your real-time interaction capabilities to be able to actually react in the moment. So the starting off point, we're not going to discuss it in a lot of detail, and I think it's where most people are at the moment, is generating intelligence in batches. So you take all of your customers overnight or over the weekend, you run some sort of model against them, and as customers interact with you through that week, that interaction is informed by the results of that batch model run. The next step you want to take up from that is to move to real-time serving, which means that you actually score the interaction as it happens. As the customer engages with you, or you want to engage with the customer, you score a model and the interaction is informed by that result. The next step is real-time training. So in real-time serving, we still have a static model. You score it in real time, but the model is only updated through some sort of manual intervention in some sort of batch process. In real-time training, you actually update the model as customers interact with you. Underlying both of those is real-time data, right? So if you don't have real-time data, then there's not a lot of point in doing either of those, because you effectively get the same result as having a batch in that case. So you need some way of handling real-time data, and we're going to talk a bit about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about how this ties into the whole generative AI evolution. And you need an interface to expose these interactions you're developing to your customers. Traditionally, those have been things like app screens, push notifications, WhatsApp. But we've all seen, over the last year and a bit so, that generative AI has emerged as a very compelling user interface. And we're going to discuss a bit about how you can incorporate these real-time capabilities into your generative AI pipeline. So let's start with real-time serving. So like I was saying, that is the ability to score your customers' interactions as they occur using the data that you have at that point in time that tells you about the moment that your customer is in. And the big advantage you get from doing this is you can be aware of the context and moment that your customer is in when you're interacting with them. And there's some really obvious things that you can only include into your intelligence and interaction generation when you are running things in real time instead of in batch. I think one of the easiest and most generic is location, right? Where someone is has a huge impact on their behavior. I mean, just think about how differently you behave at home versus at work when you're traveling, when you're out for the night, when you're at a friend's house, has a huge impact. But if you're generating something in batch, there's no way of knowing where someone is going to be when they actually are served that interaction. So you have to be able to score models in real time to incorporate the context of where someone is. There's other really obvious things that have huge advantages, like someone's current balance. Can they afford the things you're offering? What have they just purchased? You don't want to recommend something that they've just bought to buy again and they can't afford it and they're not in the right place to engage with it. So there's a lot of really obvious and compelling reasons to have real-time serving as a capability, and it really allows you to be more aware of your customer's context when you're interacting with it. So it has obvious benefits, but there are some challenges that you need to overcome when you want to do this. The first is around reliability and robustness. So if you're running things in batch over the weekend and the batch run fails, you can go and manually check if it worked, and you'll have fallback plans, and you go to a previous version and run that, or you just don't interact with anyone that week. You know how to handle it. When you are doing real-time serving, you need to be able to always return a result that makes sense. Even if it's an intelligent default, you need to be able to return an intelligent result as reliably as possible in a completely robust way so that you don't break any key processes. Because, and this ties into the second point, you're probably going to be interacting at key points in the customer's product journey, right? Like that's when it's most impactful to engage. So you need to be robust, but you also need to be fast, like millisecond fast. Because say you want to generate offers to show to someone as they log into the app, right? There's no way you want to slow down the app login process to generate those offers. So you need to be fast enough that you have no impact on how long it takes a customer to get through whatever journey they're engaging in. So you need to be robust and reliable. You need to be fast, and you need to be able to dashboard and keep track of what is going on in your system and compare the results to this, maybe a holdout sample or some sort of profit rails, have measures to track how your predictions are performing. So yeah, that's real-time serving, very valuable. There's some hurdles you need to overcome, but well worth the effort. So the next step, once you've got that right, is real-time training. Forgive my pun, but I liked it. Real-time training is, instead of engaging with people generating interactions using a static model, you actually retrain your model as customers interact with you. And one of the big motivating factors behind this, well, there's two, but what the first is, humans are dynamic, right? In almost any context, human behavior shifts over time, right? And the second thing is, the most powerful data in terms of modeling human interactions is human interaction data. So the data that you're generating as people interact with you is what you need to model their interactions. It sounds obvious, but it's not about having static demographic data. It's the stuff that people are generating as they engage with you, and that those interactions are going to change over time. So if you can incorporate a real-time training approach, you can capture those changes in time automatically. So as people's behavior shifts, the outcome of your model will also shift. Another huge benefit that this gives you is it makes the cold start problem much easier to deal with. You don't have to come up with complicated rules and solutions and ways to handle new people coming in or new offers being added to your system. If you have real-time training, you can just add those in, and the the system will automatically start presenting them to customers and learn how to handle them and show them to the right people in the right moment. So that's also a big advantage of moving to real-time training. This obviously also has some difficulties with implementing it, and they're actually pretty similar to the real-time serving challenges, just slightly exacerbated. So you still need to be reliable and robust, but now not only with the actual presenting of the results, but also with retraining your model. So you need to be able to score and train robustly and reliably. And you also need to be able to do both quickly, right? So you can't fall behind with your model training and you're still training your model that was from yesterday's interactions, and it's queued up till you can score based on what's happening today. And then again, you want to have the right dashboarding set up to see how are your models converging, what are they converging on, are they still outperforming some sort of holdout sample, are things behaving in a way that makes sense to you and that you would expect. So there's one other benefit to real-time training that I wanted to focus in on a bit more, because it's very powerful but also quite subtle, is that real-time training allows you to capture the intangible. So humans are, like I said, they're hugely influenced by shared social rituals, dynamic context, dynamic personal context, and that defines a lot of how people behave, but it's generally not quantifiable in data that's available in a traditional machine learning process. Depending on what sphere you're working in, you may have bits and pieces of that data here and there, but no one's going to have a complete data set of what is this person's dynamic personal context, what shared social rituals are they going through. And Jess will talk a bit more about things like shared social rituals and those sort of things if you're not familiar with the concepts. But I think we can all, from personal experience, imagine how these things impact people. And that data is just not available, but it has a huge impact. But if you are doing something like training one model for all of your customers, then as that customer's behavior shifts due to their shifting personal context, so they are away for the long weekend, or they change their job or their relationship, or they're watching the rugby with everyone, whatever that happens to be, as that changes, your model will automatically pick up and adjust to those changes using the data that you do give it. So you actually, without having to specifically say this is the ritual that's going on, you can still capture the changes that ritual creates and then take advantage of those opportunities. So that's, especially if you are training at a model per customer level, it's a hugely impactful benefit that you get from real-time training. The next point is around generating real-time data. When we have discussions with people around reacting in real time, the big stumbling block that's always raised is, okay, cool, that all sounds great, but never mind real-time data. We can't even get data to score like a static model in production. Like, how would we ever manage to get real-time data? Come and talk to us in 10 years, sort of thing. But and it's a difficult problem to solve, right? How do you get your current data you have offline to be real-time in production? But actually, that's not the problem you need to solve, right? And the actual solution here is, instead of thinking about how can I get my offline data into production, you need to shift your thinking about the problem. And the big thing you need to think about is what I was saying before, that the best data for modeling human interactions is human interaction data. And you can log human interaction data, and you can do it in a rigorous and robust and reliable way. So if you shift your thinking, and instead of thinking about the normal kind of data science process where you go hypothesis, data, model, productionize, analyze, hypothesis, what if we started with hypothesis, as we always have to do? What are you trying to change? How do you think you could change it? But then you take that hypothesis, and in that space, you immediately start interacting with your customers and logging their data. And You won't, and you can include, if you want to, expert knowledge in the form of prior information, but you actually just start engaging with customers and you build up those logs, and then you immediately in real time start learning from that logged data, right? So you actually are creating, by engaging with customers, you are creating the data that you need to engage with them in real time. So your real-time serving data is created by actually starting off with the prediction part of the process, instead of restricting yourself to say, how do we get this demographic data available? And you'll see it's incredibly when you do this, because, like I said, that interaction data is the most important thing for predicting how to engage with people. Right? You develop your hypothesis, you start interacting with people, you learn from your log data source, and then you take that data that you built and you can take it offline, you can further enrich it, you can do analysis on it to refine your hypothesis, you can use it to motivate having some of your offline data be made available in production, all of those sort of things that you can refine as you go. But actually generating real-time data is not as big a problem as you think, as long as you can log your interaction data with customers and you can use that data in production, which is something we know how to solve, right? And then, yep.
Sorry, just a second. Lindy has his hand raised to ask a question on that point that you were talking to just now.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, thanks, Jessica. Eric, I just wanted to ask, why is it that all the other firms, a lot of clients that we see, haven't reached where ecosystem is? And because a whole load of money has been put into building infrastructure, storing the data, trying to figure out where the data is. So with the result that they ask why has nobody else done this themselves, so far as I can tell?
So I think there's probably a couple of reasons. The one is, I think it's not actually easy to shift your thinking about this process, right? Like I said, this is a reversal of the way that people normally think about adding intelligence in production. Mm-hmm. And that's not a trivial thing to crack. I think this isn't something that we just like wrote down on our first day of work as an obvious principle. Like, it took a long time of working in the space and seeing how problems actually worked in practice to figure out that this is actually a better way of doing things. I think the second is probably tied to your first point of people have spent a lot of money building out data infrastructures and all sorts of things. I think that makes it even harder to shift your thinking. Like, oh, maybe I didn't need to spend all of that money. Sure. We're not in that place where we're like, oh, maybe this wasn't necessary. So it's easier for us to make this kind of shift in thinking.
Yeah. Can I give a pessimistic view?
Go ahead, Jay.
So the reality is that if you're a digital company, any of the world's top trillion-dollar companies, top performing, leader in your class, you already do this. Okay, so let's make sure we understand that. So if you're a Tesla, even if you're a VW, you do this with your latest technology tracking and doing the things you need to do. If you're anything from Meta or Google or those companies, you've got hundreds of people working on this continuously. Mm-hmm. So the pessimistic view is that if you're a typical bank, telco, retailer, your favorite consulting firm has got no clue how it works. Yeah. So the only advice they can give you is what they found in a textbook that is supposed to be called this thing called best practice, that is not even appropriate in the modern world. But it makes money. So that means that the entire consulting assignment, and maybe the reason why I'm pessimistic about this is because I've now experienced that 5 out of 5 conversations I've had in the last while, where the client was deeply impressed with a platform called PowerPoint, that a consulting firm could present a great story, then spend huge amounts of money building out something that is historically valuable, and now sits in a phase where they have to now monetize that, realizing that whatever they built is not really practical anymore. But as soon as you look at the companies who are leaders in their field, they don't think like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think that phase is going to continue for much longer. I mean, I spent some amazing time in the last 2 days with Vodafone's European people and a bunch of other execs. And we were talking about what's happening in other parts of the world. And you have a company who's got over 100 cases in production that are real time, who's rolling out an extensive campaign around this, who's making everything. That means that they totally embrace the fact that this is the only way the world works.
Yeah.
So the ones who haven't got there yet will get there.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, I mean, you probably still own a VHS machine like I do, or I don't really anymore. I think it's in a garage somewhere. But at some point you realize that online streaming is better. And there might still be the ones, but because your consulting firm tells you that, no, let's go look at the cases of people. Let's go do a statistical view of how many people are using it. And you say, well, the people who are using the following that look like you are the only ones who are supposed to do this. And actually, I presented yesterday, McKinsey & Company published a paper on appropriate practice for leading telcos around the world. And basically just alluded, not even extrapolated the story to say that real time is the only way that they're going to compete in the future, not realizing that a bunch of those companies have already implemented it. So I think that we are on the cusp of it. It is just that most companies have not even got their minds around it. And it's not that difficult to get right if you have the right framework to work from.
I get it. Okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to be too pessimistic, but that's a view that I've found again over the last few days. It was this very vivid.
I get it. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Eric.
Cool. No problem. Cool. Yeah. The next thing is, like I said, kind of how do real-time and generative AI collaborate? So I think we've all seen what a compelling interface for engagement generative AI is, but how can you get all of these benefits we've been talking about in terms of reacting in real time and taking advantage of opportunities in the moment into your generative AI pipeline? And basically, you need to be able to inject facts into the generative AI process. So as someone is interacting with the generative AI, kind of extract the concepts that they're talking about, get the relevant real-time intelligence to produce results, and insert that seamlessly into the response that the customer receives from the generative AI. So we call that fact injection. The principle is to take this real-time and kind of insert it seamlessly into the responses that someone's getting. But of course, you also want to have that like built into your general generative AI pipeline so that you can have it all work together. You want to be able to do your fine-tuning or use set up a vector feature store, have these facts injected, which also, by the way, helps a lot with the whole hallucination problem. If you can, instead of saying it to the generative AI, come up with these solutions, you're saying, talk about these solutions to the customer, like explain these solutions to the customer, very vague terms, and then having that interface that people can use. I think having that full pipeline with that fact injection piece tied into it is the workable solution we found to combining these benefits from real time into the generative AI space. So I hope that gives you a good view of like what it means to be able to react in real time, some of the very clear benefits that you get from it, but also some of the challenges that you need to overcome to get it right. Jess is now going to do the same for human behavior and also talk about the fact that these two are very powerful individually, but actually there's some real benefits in the combination of them as well that kind of only really appear if you have both of these capabilities available. So Jess, go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Just because you are managing the slideshow right now, I'm just going to say slide when we skip to the next. I hope it's not too jarring. But so I just wanted to step through relatively quickly and at a relatively high level discussion or talk regarding crafting an understanding of human behavior within the system. So I want to start from the baseline, which is gaining an understanding of the social environments in which humans exist and collaborate. And then to build onto that, to get closer and closer to the individual human within each of your customers. So slide One of the fundamental social science theories or frameworks that we use is to look at social functionalism. This is a framework of social theory which sees society as a collection that ultimately works together. And they work together in order to maintain a sense of stability and harmony when you think about a functioning society. So what functionalism shows us in terms of behavior within a system is often little more than just that this human is a participant of society. Now, it might sound a little bit obvious, but this is actually a very important framework or grounding to have in order to understand the sort of more subtler and nuanced elements of behavior. Slide. So on top of that, when it's paired with our theory or our understanding of functionalism, you can look at social constructivism. Now, constructivism is more of a social theory that talks about how humans ultimately collectively create a construct amongst each other. So we are taught behaviors and therefore we will replicate those behaviors. So we have this constructed, or this collection of constructed realities. Now, this is where we can start to see more of the cultural nuances, more of the developmental elements that show a little bit more individualism than just this is a human in society. So an example would be that functionalism would tell us that within our society at the moment, humans need food to sustain life. And within our society, you have to buy food in order to sustain your own life. So therefore, any kind of indication that a human has bought food is just an indication that they're human. Now, what constructivism gives us is the understanding that you could buy meat from a grocery store, so you could buy food from a grocery store, but you cannot buy something like shampoo from a butchery. So we start to be able to slice out a few more of the cultural nuances and the social nuances. All right, slide. Now, something that is what Eric mentioned a little bit earlier that I'd like to go into is what both functionalism and constructivism helps us to understand and to unpick is gaining a view of social rituals within a particular social environment. Rituals are termed or deemed as certain activities which involve gestures or words or actions, and they're often prescribed by a culture or just a community, even a subculture, or an age group as well. Now, for example, and a very current example as well would be, that you have collections of people that would participate in the annual festival of Halloween every October. And this year, though, there was a spanner that was thrown into the works where that social ritual would need to have changed somewhat. It's important to then identify and to pick out the people that would consistently celebrate Halloween, those that also enjoy rugby and that may have changed that behavior this year alone, and those that never do either, and to understand the social nuances there. So something that's then moving towards an even more individualized perspective of the customer in your system, or the human in that system, is to apply psychological constructs alongside these sociological baselines. And this would help to craft an understanding of the human themselves and the behaviors that they're participating in. Now, psychology has given us a vast number of constructs from which to work from. I mean, a few of these examples are Like we've got ocean models and the Myers-Briggs and even Jungian theory as well. Now, the one thing that all of these then have in common is this concept of the personality of the individual. Now, what's quite important at this point, and quite tricky as well, is making sure that an understanding of these human sociological and psychological constructs are then translated into machine learning terms so that you can not necessarily say that somebody is an explicit introvert based on their data, but somebody that functions like an introvert within a particular environment, within a particular data environment or business environment. So slide, what we've done, the ecosystem is actually put together a series of metrics that could be used to extract and identify the characteristics of personality within a system. Now, this would be, as I mentioned already, related to the business environment as well as the technological environment in which this data is being extracted from. So just a high-level view, I mean, there's things like habitual behavior, which you can try to understand through the actions and interactions. You can see the level of planning through which a person engages with a system, as well as something even like participation eagerness, like how eager is an individual to engage with you when you engage with them. Understanding a personality would be seeing whether the individual within the system tends to step a little bit more deliberately through a space or through a journey, or if they're perhaps a little bit more curious and like to shop around, if you will. Now, personality can be detected in two ways in particular. So the first is a data-first approach, which is something that most companies really want to be able to do, but there is a lot of difficulty or quite a lot of challenges associated with this. So a data-first approach is where you will take whatever data you already have and begin to extract an understanding of the possible personality nuances within that data. A great example of this is within banking data. You can identify certain spend personalities within data that exists. Now, one that relates to what Eric was mentioning earlier regarding the generation of real-time behavior is to actually generate behavioral data. Generating real-time data. So this is to generate behavioral data as well alongside that. And that's where you would take a certain set of hypotheses that you have learned from your sociological theories and your psychological theories and craft these assumptions in such a way that would then be passed along or interacted with your customers on. And you can then learn based on those interactions. Now, at this point, slide, what I want to do is to just call back to another thing that Eric mentioned, which was this concept of the changing human, the ever-changing human. So in this sense, in order to keep up with the changing human and to also generate behavioral data, experimentation is vital to doing this. You need to be able to craft a space or a set of interactions and engagements that would help you to learn from the customer, because the psychological and the sociological theories will only get us so far. But in order for you to understand the truly subtle nuances of the individual human within the system, you need to be able to test that. You need to be able to experiment. Now, society teaches us, as an example, that these assumptions that you can craft from human-based theories tend to be quite narrow, and they can be quite detrimental as well. I mean, if we think about the assumption that blue is for boys and pink is for girls is not necessarily wrong, but it's quite a narrow perspective. And you need to be able to then branch out and experiment with that in order to identify which girls like blue, which boys like pink, which humans like neither of those colors, and then to test a whole array of different colors in order to find out which direction you should actually be going for that individual, rather than applying the one size fits all approach. Now, a great example of popular companies that function within the space and do so really well is like Pinterest and Spotify as well, where they learn from you about your ever-changing human nuances. So, slide. Just moving from the examples that I've given now with Pinterest and Spotify, applying human behavior to a space for profitable outcomes can actually be done in a number of different ways. Once you have a basic view or a basic set of assumptions and hypotheses regarding a certain personality. So you can, to use a very current example, with regards to language, you can craft a series of engagements that will appeal to a particular personality at a particular time frame. And this could be in the form of messaging on a website when they're logged in, or even in outbound engagements as well. Now, something that generative AI could help with this too is by using like ecosystems fact injection, you can ultimately train your generative AI to spontaneously craft messages that are targeted specifically or styled specifically to fit a certain personality or personal engagement. Now, another example would be to have an app that has a series of structures that fit the needs of a particular personality. So this would be using those metrics that I showed just now, where you would have longer content, or at least more content for those that are more deliberate in their steps through a system. Or you could have shorter and more direct journeys that are designed for individuals that don't want to explore or be curious within a space. They'd like to just get done what they need to get done. All right, next slide. This is where we can close the circle to using and linking behavioral data as well as real-time data to create this real-time behavioral scenario or setting in which you can truly understand, or at least it's a vital space to understand your human in the moment they're in. So as I mentioned, it's a particularly fertile space, real time, for using and utilizing behavioral constructs because you can see the picture of the moment the customer is in. So here we've also spoken about the benefits as well as the challenges of using real-time behavior as well as, real-time data as well as behavioral data. And hopefully with this information, you can then go forward and craft your own human-centric interactions and your own compelling human interactions. Slide. So you can then take advantage of opportunities in the moment by incorporating real-time and behavioral capabilities.